Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Center Square's state government correspondent, and it's Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, day 51 of the legislative session. That's 9 more days to go before the 60-day session is over, and it's a race right now for Democrats to get their income tax bill over the finish line, Senate Bill 6346. The version that came out of the House committee last week, it's quite a bit different than the version that cleared the Senate. You may recall the full Senate has already passed out the income tax bill, or the millionaire's tax, as supporters refer to it. But the House has yet to bring it up on the full floor. I am told that today, being Tuesday, is not going to be the day that the House brings it up on the floor. Of course, Democrats are in charge of what gets pulled off the calendar onto the floor. So it could still happen. We're certainly watching that. Today, Democrats held a press conference with their progressive groups lobbying to press for the tax to fund education, healthcare, tax breaks for families. And we also had Republicans addressing this in their media avail. So we're going to get into that. The huge case that came out of the state Supreme Court yesterday is something we're going to spend some time talking about in today's episode as well. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled late on Monday on parental rights, and teachers in California being forced really to keep secrets from parents. Washington has the same student privacy policies surrounding gender issues that California operates with. So I've taken some time today to speak with a legal expert and some lawmakers to get their take on the ruling and see if they think it's going to lead to any changes here. Kind of have a difference of opinion on whether or not there will be some immediate implications here. And I am waiting as well for a response from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Superintendent Chris Rakedahl. And I will include that in my article when it publishes today up on the Center Square Washington page. So be watching for that. But I'm actually going to start with that right there, the SCOTUS ruling that we got late on Monday, being described as a monumental victory for parental rights. So this was the case Mirabelli v. Bonta. And the court ruled that California laws that force teachers to lie to parents, really, to violate their parental rights, that's a no-no, because those parental rights are upheld by both the First and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. Now, in Washington state, as I mentioned, some parental rights groups are not really optimistic that this ruling is going to change anything for our state's 295 school districts. And we here in Washington have those same protections in place for student privacy, such that parents are not informed if their child is socially transitioning. And if you're not familiar with really what all that means, so say Bobby goes to school and goes to his teacher that day and says, I don't want you to call me Bobby anymore. I want you to call me Betty. And I want you to use she, her pronouns when you refer to me. And I want you to tell my classmates that that's my new identity here at school. But I don't want you to tell my parents. Bobby may also be going to a counselor at school and saying, I'm really confused about my gender identity. I think I might be really a girl trapped in a boy's body. Can you find me some counselors to talk to? Can you maybe even take me outside of school to meet with some medical professionals who could talk to me about what's involved in potentially beginning the medical transition of gender? So that's the crux of the issue. And in California, as in here in Washington, up until this ruling, teachers are not allowed, if the student doesn't want their parents to know, teachers are not allowed to share that information with the parents. A lot of people have a big problem with this. And it was a 6-3 ruling that came from the United States Supreme Court on Monday, reversing a ruling that came out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which had previously allowed California's policy to stand. So I did get some comments from David Spring with the Washington Parents Network. He's been leading this fight here in Washington, challenging OSPI's directive to school districts about boys being allowed into girls' spaces, into girls' sports, also the parental rights issues of notification. But he told me he's not really optimistic at all that anything is going to change. And I want to show you here up on the screen part of what he posted in an article today. We do not believe that our governor and our state superintendent will issue such a statement or uphold their oath of office. Instead, we believe that both will continue to violate parental rights and continue to violate the U.S. Constitution. And Mr. Spring put up a lengthy article, which I'm going to link in my article on this today as well, basically saying based on how OSPI has operated, leading up till now with all of this, even though the, Trump administration issued an executive order, I think it might have been day one in office, basically saying no boys and girls sports and no boys and girls bathrooms. And OSPI responded to say our state law supersedes, even though that isn't how many constitutional experts see that. I also spoke this morning with Jackson Maynard, executive director of the Citizen Action Defense Fund, and they filed a lawsuit late last year in Thurston County Superior Court challenging House Bill 1296. You may recall that was passed last year's legislative session, where lawmakers basically reversed the parental rights initiative that they had adopted into law a year prior. So that lawsuit is still moving forward. And Maynard told me today he believes this ruling from the Supreme Court might really help their case.
I think it's important not just for freedom of speech and for religious rights, for the two teachers that were plaintiffs in that case that were challenging policies brought forward by the state of California that forced them as teachers to not disclose information to parents about their children that they felt like was in violation of their freedom of speech and their religious faith. But I think it's also really important for parental rights. We have some other policies here in Washington state that similarly require school districts not to disclose information to parents that about their own students and about their students' health. That's part of why we brought the challenge to House Bill 1296, which was the bill that was passed last year by the legislature that overturned and kind of revised the parental rights initiative that was passed the year before. And our challenge was essentially asserting that parental rights were affected by that legislation and the way that they amended it. So there's a lot from that decision that we'll be able to use potentially in the challenge here in Washington state.
This morning, I got a chance to virtually meet with Republican leadership during their weekly media availability. And this was my question. I asked about this case specifically and got this response from Republican Senator John Braun, who was the Senate's minority leader.
What I read characterized as the largest win for parents' rights in recent history, and I agree with that. I have said for several years as we've been debating this topic that if children are having, gender dysphoria or struggling with other things, that's the absolute wrong time, the worst time perhaps, to separate them from their parents. And I certainly recognize that there may be that may be a difficult time for parents, but parents are built for difficult times, and certainly that's better than not have your family support, even if there's disagreement. And we already have rules in place, have for many decades, that address actual abusive situations, and that's a different situation. But the idea that we wouldn't tell parents about these very significant things going on in their children's lives, I think is very harmful to children, to parents, to the trust between school districts and parents and children, and it hurts the whole situation. So I think this is an important step. It's a big win for parents, and I think it will lead to better outcomes long term.
So he didn't specifically answer. I did ask, do you think this is going to make any change here? He didn't really get into that at all. But Washington State GOP Chair Jim Walsh told me this morning he believes it should absolutely change things here immediately because Washington, he says, must respect the nation's high court. Here's part of my conversation with Representative Jim Walsh.
The U.S. Supreme Court said the parents can't be shut out or kept in the dark about what's going on with their kids at school. And as we've got in California, as we've got up here in Washington, as we've got in some states, there's this move afoot to what they call socially transition, gender confused children. And so that at school, a boy can pass as a girl or try to, and this is hidden from the parents or the custodial guardians, family members of the kid. This is very, very bad stuff. It is bad ethically, it's bad legally, it's bad morally. And the US Supreme Court's ruling has, of course, emphasized the legal part. It is illegal for school employees to secretly really administer any kind of health care or mental health care to a child and not tell the parents. The flashpoint is this matter of gender confused kids and what's going on, but really the ruling applies to any health care or mental health care that a minor child would receive at school and the school not tell the parents about it. So it's a win for parents, it's a win for families. I believe it's a win for kids.
So as I mentioned when we opened, I did reach out to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and Superintendent Chris Rakedahl for comments. Shortly before we're recording this podcast, I got a response back from someone in the office that said they are preparing an official response to my request for comment on the SCOTUS ruling. So though I don't have that to share with you right now, it will be included in my article publishing later in the day on Tuesday up at the Center Square, Washington's site. So now to where things stand on the income tax, the millionaire's tax, Senate Bill 6346. Not expected to come to the House for a floor vote today, but anything can happen. Remember, it has already passed the full Senate. And the House Finance Committee, when it brought it up and execed it out of committee last week, made some amendments. So the Democrats are going to have to hash all of that out. It did come up in this morning's Republican leadership media availability, and Representative Connors of Conowick, she's a realtor, and she's been really trying to hammer the fact that she thinks, businesses will flee. There's a capital flight's a real thing. And she brought up the Association of Washington Business and a recent poll they put out that said about 50% of all businesses in this state are considering leaving even before this tax goes into effect. Because remember, if it is passed this session and signed into law by Governor Ferguson, there will be almost immediate legal challenges. There are constitutional issues, according to opponents, and it's likely to be tied up in the courts for some time. And even if there were no challenges, it's not going to be going into effect until 2029. So plenty of time for businesses to, pull up stakes and relocate if this is something that they want to avoid. Senator Chris Gildon of Puyallup, who's budget lead for the Senate, he noted the contradiction between majority members who are pushing the income tax, but at the same time are undoing some taxes they just raised last year. Here's that comment from Senator Gildon.
One of the interesting things to me about this is the logical inconsistency of implementing an income tax and saying it's not going to have an effect on capital flight and people leaving our state, while at the same time lowering the threshold for the estate tax and explicitly acknowledging that it's going to have an effect of people leaving our state. I don't know how you can push both of those ideas at the same time in an intellectually consistent manner.
And I also asked State GOP Chairman Jim Walsh about the income tax fight. Where is everything right now? He told me there are wide differences between the two versions of the income tax moving at this point. He thinks both are bad, but he says the Democrats are kind of infighting right now to see, what's going to hold up, what additional amendments might come up, and how to reconcile all that to keep this thing alive. So here's part of that conversation with Representative Walsh.
The language that gave a preferable B&O tax status and some other preferable tax statuses to certain industry groups, primarily big tech, but some other big business interests, were stripped out. Those groups who might have been neutral or even slightly positive on the state income tax scheme now are against it, as they should be, and they should have been all along, frankly. If the governor and his minions want a state income tax, they need to run a state constitutional amendment. And one of their members on the Democrat side actually offered the state constitutional amendment, which I wouldn't agree with, but procedurally, it's the right way to go. And I don't know, that may be getting a little bit of traction, but I don't think it's getting very much a traction over on the Democrat side. But right now, all the negotiation, all the panic, all the neurosis, that's amongst the Democrats. The hardcore supporters of the governor versus the less hardcore supporters of the governor are all trying to figure out how to put some more lipstick on this pig and make it less horrible.
He brought up the fact that maybe because the B&O tax hike phase out year earlier, which was in the Senate version, was yanked out when it went through the House Committee on Finance. And that may explain why we've had some other members from the business community and big tech specifically coming out just in the last couple of days. My colleague TJ Martinell put up an article on our page at the Center Square Washington's page on Monday, talking about this letter that this group of folks, I'm trying to read who these tech sector company leaders are. Allen Institute founding CEO, the Read AI CEO, co-founder David Shim, founder and former VP for AI at Microsoft, Salesforce software engineering. All these folks sent this letter to Governor Ferguson saying, don't do this, Bob. Do not do this income tax. It's going to kill business. It's going to kill innovation in the state of Washington. And so we're going to see if that has any effect on where the governor is positioned. Also, found out in that GOP avail this morning that Senator Braun and Representative Drew Stokesbury of the House leadership on the House side are meeting today with Governor Ferguson. They said this is the first time that they've sat down with him in more than 2 weeks. They expect to be talking about the income tax, of course, and where the governor is, because he's been pushing back on the different versions that have come out on this, saying there's not enough tax relief. I want more tax relief in on the income tax bill. Otherwise, I won't sign it. Senator Braun said he also hopes they will get a chance to talk about somehow reprioritizing juvenile rehabilitation. Remember all the issues in the last couple of years with the Green Hill School in Chehalis, and that's Braun's district. They've had massive population, explosion there. You've got some maximum security folks in with, lower level offenders, not a lot of therapy and education that's going on like it's supposed to be because they're simply overwhelmed at this point. He was really hoping that a bill offered this session would move through. It's dead right now. Maybe the governor can somehow get it resurrected. Braun's going to push on that. And then he said he expects also to have some discussion about tort reform, which is dead for the session, large payouts from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for children that have been harmed, many cases killed when left with drug-addicted parents. And of course, we have not had legislation moving forward to do anything about that imminent harm standard this session. So those were some of the other topics that the leadership hoped to have in conversation with Governor Ferguson today. So we hope to get an update for you tomorrow on how that conversation went, maybe some insight as to where the governor is right now on the income tax. So that's a wrap for day 51 of the session, the Tuesday episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Really appreciate you watching, and I hope you'll tune in again tomorrow. In the meantime, check out our Center Square Washington page for articles, not just that I've put up, but my colleagues here on the rest of our Washington State team. And again, I thank you for watching. Have a great day.